You look 25 years
Yes, of
younger.
course it started out nicely, right?
Can't the light be put
Yeah,
back
he's a
inside?
dangerous man.
And Warren, we run until 4, and then we have to change over. So 4 o'clock we run, then we take a 15-minute break, and then we start up
Very
again.
good. Feel free to interrupt me if I get
No,
lost in
no,
content.
no problem.
Amy?
Are you set up yet?
What?
I am.
Rolling.
Thank you. And one of us is probably rolling. Oops. This is formatted, Tom. Thank you. I'm rolling. Roll. Warren Farrell, take 1.
One Warren Farrell's enough.
One of the first things they do to you when you are a young man and they finally decide that they should give you a scholarship to go to the worst, most miserable school in the world, which was the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. The first thing they do is they tell you, if you're from America, that you'll never pass the languages, you'll never be better than the German scholars there, and we don't want any more social gospel. We want real, pure theology. And so I listened to them, and I'd been an actor, and I figured that, fuck the Germans. And so I stuck with it, and I came out second in our whole school situation. But I learned 2 lessons right away. There are 2 things that I believe in more than anything else. Formgeschichte, which means sacred form, and second, Heilgeschichte, which means history sacred. And always look at your own history, and always look at the history of your friends, and always look at the moments that we talked about, that I learned by heart some lyrics right that day. I knew not 'twas a giant hour that soon would pass away. And I look back at the early days with Ward, and when we were looking at what we were going to do in San Francisco with all those damn crazy young adults that weren't going the way they should. And we had to set them right. And so we've been trying ever since, not so much to set them right, but just to figure out what the hell went on. And so one of the things we have to do ourselves is to look at history. And I think it's sacred. Some of the moments and some of the remembrances of those early days, they were wonderful, and they led to where we are now. And it's a privilege and an honor and great joy for Warren to come and bring us up to date and tell us what the hell's going on, Warren.
Before we do, I just want to say that this is a culture, as we all know, that is very sexually adverse and sexually confusing. And in that confusion, Ted McElveen has pursued through and created one of the few areas of safety to explore sexuality and really do something about it. Ted, get back in here.
Ted.
Somebody get...
Can you speak up a little bit more?
Yes, sure. I just want to ask us to stand up and give Ted a standing ovation for the work that he has done over the years. And Ted, before you leave this room, the title of this talk is devoted to you in the 2 areas that you have sort of focused on in your life, sex and religion. And so it's called Male-Female Sex as the Sexual Tower of Babel. How the boy crisis and shades of gray women with fantasies of being taken by a male who is required to get affirmative consent when he's in failure lunch mode and being sold sex in a capitalist yet litigious society has created the Sexual Tower of Babel. That's the subtitle. Of course, you all can repeat that back to me. What I'm going to do today is just start out with a little bit of an explanation of that subtitle, then move into an analysis of what I see happening with sex, what's changed and what hasn't. And then I'm going to move into doing some very light experiential work. Those of you who are interested in some of the more intense experiential work that I've done here with the Institute, there's a past program I did that included a men's beauty contest and a role reversal date. But when the sides of this group is more appropriate for more intimate conversations, so I dumped the PowerPoint, but also it's not large enough for a really great role reversal date and men's beauty contest, which is what I do to get both sexes to walk a mile in each other's moccasins. So I'll do a modified version of the men's beauty contest, much simpler, and the role reversal date, and also a modified version of introducing us to the male view of the world. And so, because we get in this culture a lot of the women's view of the world in the last 30 years, I'm going to be introducing some of what's happening that's creating the boy crisis, and connecting that boy crisis to what's happening with sexuality today. So the subtitle, as I mentioned, I will lead from there into sort of a little bit of an opening thing that I'll read, and this is mostly for humor. A common interpretation of Genesis, as in Genesis 11, is that when humans tried to unify and build a tower that entered into the heavens, the Lord, fearing they'd become entitled and arrogant, created different languages to keep humans confused and therefore to continue needing God. The tower was in the city of what? Babel, exactly. Hebrew for Balal, meaning to jumble. Hence our word Babel. Recently, humans have created another Tower of Babel, the birth control pill. No, please leave that there.
Oh, no, he needed that.
That's all right, no problem. The other humans, fearing the birth control pill would threaten the system of sexual temptation followed by sexual deprivation, followed by the sale of products to reduce sexual anxiety, played God. In fear that all humans might just enjoy each other sexually, heaven forbid, we humans created confusion by the simultaneous proliferation of affirmative consent laws in California, while video porn and 50 Shades of Grey send slightly different messages to the human brain. To help girls feel superior, boys cooperated and experienced a boy crisis. To help girls feel frustrated, the boy crisis created ever more high-performing girls competing for ever fewer high-performing boys. To further confuse ourselves, we created laws such as don't ask, don't tell, followed quickly by gay marriage or ask, tell, and celebrate in some states, but not in others. Followed quickly by the federal government saying everyone celebrate, everyone tell, followed by the Alabama Supreme Court saying, not if you live in Alabama, you don't. In the workplace, women fell in love with the more powerful men. But if a man, the gender told to initiate sex, was in fact powerful and did in fact initiate sex, she decided it was time for a courtship or time to take him to court. So either we became our own God, or sex therapists created the Tower of Sexual Babel to create a new old profession and keep people in perpetual need of them. So that's a little opening thoughts there. So, what I wanted to start out dealing with is a bit about what's changed. And when I was saying what's changed that has created a generation gap between, on the one hand, teenagers and 20-somethings today, and the other hand, their parents and grandparents. I include grandparents because, as you know, with 53% of women under 30 having children without being married, many of those children are being raised by single mothers, and that means that oftentimes grandparents are very much involved in the parenting process. And so we can't separate parents from grandparents anymore as we used to. So what shocks grandparents the most is, of course, hooking up. And for the grandparents, hooking up is a huge change. And girls have, and then the second thing that shocks the grandparents and many parents is girls having the option to initiate sex. Boys still have the expectation, but boys don't have to initiate unless they want their first choice girls or women. Then they have to initiate. More on that first choice distinction later. Another thing that's changed is the effects of medications for ADHD type drugs the effects of those medications on lowering male testosterone. Another is the effects of free video porn on the brain and on male testosterone and on the production of dopamine. Another thing that's changed is the effects of phthalates. Do you know what phthalates are? Phthalates are yes, go ahead.
Oh,
Oh, no, not enough to speak
Not
up.
loud.
All right, very good. Phthalates are what leach from plastics that we dump in waters and rivers and streams. So Lake Apopka near Disneyland has a huge amount of phthalates. And in areas in almost every significant city where there's a great deal of plastics thrown into streams and that leach phthalates, phthalates are interrupters of estrogen. And so they are endocrine interrupters, I'm sorry. Endocrine interrupters that boost estrogen and decrease testosterone. So you have, and we've always had, as long as those among us who are a little bit older, as long as we remember, girls were always more mature in adolescent years than boys were. But now these endocrine interrupters are increasing the male-female puberty gap. Girls are maturing much more quickly than boys, particularly girls located in areas where there's streams or rivers or lakes where the water is fed into the family through that. And so particularly around Washington, D.C., in the state of Washington, but hundreds of other places in the United States that have been tested, we find the genitalia on frogs and the genitalia on salmons disappearing if they're male genitalia. And so that's just an example of what's happening that's increasing on an environmental level the male-female maturity gap. Another thing that's changed is the boy crisis. Girls stop going way up and boys stop going way down. Boys are in failure to launch mode. Cheerleaders, however, don't fall in love with boys who are failures to launch. They still cheer for the quarterbacks. And so we have this huge gap between what women want and what men our boys are increasingly becoming. Of course, there's no change at all. We have a huge change. Males, of course, no longer fall in love with beautiful women. And women no longer fall in love with men who are successful, rich, and powerful. None of us have noticed any of that happening in the world. Of course, I'm being facetious. In essence, then, the styles have changed, but we're still wearing the same old clothes. So what's remained the same? What are those same old clothes? The same old clothes start, of course, with males falling in love with beautiful women and younger women. And women falling in love with men who are successful, rich, and powerful. People magazine is the female Playboy. Hence, high school football quarterbacks still get the pick of the cheerleaders. And the cheerleaders cheer 1st and 10, do it again, or between the lines, 1st and 10, risk a concussion again. Because all throughout history, the societies that survive have survived based on their ability to train boys to be disposable. Disposable in war, or disposable in the workplace. And football was the best preparation for disposability in the United States. Ice hockey in Canada, other, bullfighting in other places. But it's all games that are helping boys feel like they are heroes if they are disposable. And girls participate in that process by marrying, more likely to be marrying, the officer and the gentleman, rather than the private and the pacifist. So another thing that's remained the same is sex is dirty. Boys initiate the dirt. Sex is dirty. Boys initiate the dirt. So let's close our eyes together and do this litmus test on that issue with me. Let's take the sex is dirty first. Imagine your parents when you were 11 and perhaps make believe you're with a 13-year-old sister or brother. And imagine yourselves watching a murder mystery like CSI on TV. Now, rank your parents' likely reaction on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being minimal reaction, they just noticed you and registered it, and 10 being totally appalled that you're watching a murder mystery on TV. Raise your hand if your parents' reaction is closer to 1, just registering it. Yeah, no big thing. Raise your hand if your parents would have been totally appalled. Raise your hand if you didn't understand the question and therefore didn't raise your hand.
I would go back during the not very appalled.
Not very appalled, yes, very good. Okay, now imagine everything being the same. You're the same ages. Your parents notice you watching TV again. But this time you're watching a naked couple having sex. The children, you as an 11-year-old boy or girl and your 13-year-old sister or brother, and watching a man put his fully visible penis into a woman's fully exposed vagina. Rank your parents' reaction on a scale of 1 to 10, with you and your sister watching this genital visible intercourse. So open your eyes if you would. Raise your hand if your parents would have been more on the one side, no reaction whatsoever. Raise your hand if your parents would have been more visibly appalled. And so the message we get, completely on an unconscious level, no parents go around and say to us, sex, by the way, is worse than murder. But the message unconsciously is that sex is worse than murder and violence. And so the message the boy hears is that some version of sex is dirty. Sex is more appalling than murder. The parents say things have changed though. They complain that their sons are getting calls from girls who just seem willing to give it away. So here's my test question to you. Let's take apart that sentence. When parents complain their sons are getting calls from girls who just seem willing to give it away, then what that sentence, what are the indicators of something that's remained the same and what's changed? Say your name as you speak so I can speak to the
The
people.
expectation that male is pursuer, the dismay over male being pursued, and the loss of that traditional role.
Yes.
And almost as if male being pursuer is a buffer to female sexuality. Because if male doesn't pursue, then female sexuality is not initiated or not.
Very good. Anything else that's changed or remained the same? And say your name so I can.
Jean-Yves. Jean-Yves.
Jean-Yves.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Merci, Jean. Someone else? Okay, so one of the things that's changed is their sons are getting calls from girls. In the grandparents' age and many parents' age, boys did not get calls from girls. So the parents are saying, sex is free these days, everything's changed, my God, it's disgusting. What's remained the same?
15 minutes in between.
It's disgusting. They're complaining about it. What's remained the same is the parental contempt for girls calling their son. The boy detects the parental contempt and the parental implication that these girls just don't value themselves, usually said directly that way, and that they're willing to just give it away, and in so many words, they're cheap. And so what hasn't changed is the contempt for women initiating. What's changed is that some women are doing it. So let's look at this at a deeper level. So if sex is dirty and girls shouldn't initiate it, then the boy learns that what's the full message of what he's learning? Anyone want to go for that?
Women are disgusting.
Well, yes,
Sex
that
is
sex is dirty.
Sex is dirty. Women are initiating it. Therefore, women are dirty.
Yes, or sex is dirty. Who should initiate it?
Boys.
The boys. Yeah, so girls shouldn't initiate it. If they do, they don't value themselves, and they're disgusting, and they're a disgrace to themselves. They're cheap. They're basically, and so therefore, if girls shouldn't initiate this dirty sex, who should initiate it? The only group left. Call boys, at least in the heterosexual framework. So when a boy feels that sex is dirty, and he's 12 or 13, 14 years of age, he's the least mature sex. He knows less about sex than girls do and less about girls than girls know about boys. Part of immaturity. He, the less mature sex, is asked to initiate something that's dirty, that he knows nothing about. And so he learns basically, sex is dirty, boys initiate the dirt. The feeling that results from that for many boys is I've started some 300 men's groups and some 300 women's groups around the country over the last many years, too many years. And the feeling that results for many boys as I look back on it is shame. When he feels like sex is dirty and he wants it more than women do, and he feels he wants it much more than women do, the women he's most desirable of, he feels they want it particularly less than he does with him. It can generate deep feelings of shame or him being morally inferior to women. If girls are calling boys and hooking up with boys, many parents say, wait a minute, the girl is calling the boys now, and the girls and boys are hooking up. So this whole big thing about initiation, and that being the male burden, if they're hooking up in one night, and the girls are calling boys, what's the big thing about initiation? Here's what is happening that no one is talking about. If he wants to be sexual with his first choice girls, here's why her calling him or hooking up often just magnifies his shame. Calling him and hooking up have in common a hidden formula. She often calls or hooks up with a guy who is a bit out of her league. She calls a guy she feels will not call him. As for hooking up, she often gives him sex to get a potential relationship. She hooks up to get him hooked. However, the next morning, one of two things happen. Option one, he doesn't call back. She feels hurt. And he feels shame or guilt for not calling back. He feels like he used her. Has he used her? Yes, he's used her. However, his first choice girl is still out of his league. And with the recent taste of live flesh sex, as opposed to porn, live flesh sex without rejection, fresh in his memory, it is now feeling better than video porn or sex without rejection. So he exercises, alternatively, option two. So option one is he doesn't call back. Option two is he initiates with his, quote, she's okay for sex girl. The problem is, the longer this continues, the more invested she feels. Therefore, the more hurt he is when, the more hurt she is when he ultimately does what? When he ultimately rejects her. His guilt and shame may be so strong, though, that he may not break it off directly. He may instead start treating her badly. He may start treating her dismissively. He may start ignoring her. He may start taking her for granted. He may even be abusive, if not physically, verbally. Whichever he is, as terrible as it is for the girl, it also registers in a different terrible way for the boy, feeling guilt and shame, knowing what he's doing to get her to theoretically reject him, when in fact he's all along rejecting her because he can't tell her directly. Her using of him so we're very clear, he feels guilt and shame that he did in fact use her and still is using her. Her using of him for a potential long-term relationship with somebody out of her league by being sexual quickly or hooking up quickly is invisible to him. So he doesn't have his shame tempered by his visible awareness or his conscious awareness that she was also using him. The culture does not articulate her using of him in the hookup situation or the calling of him situation. It only articulates his use and misuse of her, hence allowing the shame to generate and flourish, uninterrupted by any sense of balance. For her, she may be able, if a therapist works with her, to acknowledge that she was using him at the beginning, but the pain of the rejection or being dismissed and the anger at that, and the girlfriends helping her know that she's been used, all of those things combine to make her consciousness, her memory of her role in the using process disappear. So, how do boys handle this? How do boys handle this pressure to sort of like initiate and risk rejection? Many ways. They drink and hopefully buy drinks for girls and women. They do drugs and buy drugs for girls and women. They escape the process of rejection by watching something called video porn, but there's only 250 million options. If you check on the computer, it says limits boys enormously. They objectify beautiful women. So a construction worker that sees a gorgeous woman walk by, he may catcall to the gorgeous woman. Feels pretty obnoxious and objectifying to the gorgeous woman. Why is he doing that?
Safe.
What's that?
It's safe.
Safe, Jean? It's safe. Anybody else? It's definitely safe. And what's his motivation? Is it safe, therefore he feels good about exploiting her? Where is he coming from? He's pursuing, and it hurts less to be rejected by someone he objectifies than him saying to himself, there's a girl who would never, a woman who would never have anything to do with me. Acknowledging that to himself hurts. So he turns her into an object, calls her, hey sweetie, hey cutie, hey nice ass, because it hurts less to be rejected by an object than by a full human being. It hurts less to objectify than it does to treat somebody as someone who probably would, if you treated them as a human being, would almost invariably reject you. Yes,
I
Liz?
have a question about that. What if the girl turned the tables and she got a cat call from a guy and she turned around and said, thank you, I'm really intrigued. What's your name? I'd like to get to know you. What would happen with the guy then?
Are you suggesting to me that you've done this? No,
I
this
haven't
is my
thought
wife, right? Yes. So usually we just saw the film together. She's beautiful when she's angry, and there was, I don't know if you've seen that film. It was in the beginning in the history of the feminist movement, and at the in one of the scenes from that movie, women started going into Wall Street, and every guy that walked by, instead of saying you have a lot of money, they said, oh, you have gorgeous legs, and da-da-da, you have a great chest, and so on. And so guys had to react. Well, guys, how would you react to that if that happened to you? The woman,
I used to be flattered, I feel like. But I actually had that happening on the way here, walking back, and I gave the guy a dirty look.
you gave the guy a dirty look, yes.
Yeah, well, it was kind of annoying and rude. I thought, like, you don't even know me. You can say hi to me. You don't need to call me that.
Yes,
But some girls are flattered, I guess. I'm like, I don't know you, dude. Go back to what you're doing.
Anybody else? Have any thoughts on that? Yeah, the great majority of responses. Yes,
I'd
Liz?
like to know what the guys in here think. What would they
Yeah.
do?
What would y'all do if?
I would be like, heck yeah, gorgeous girl is giving me a compliment. I feel like that's how most women.
And how would you
I think
respond?
it's very subjective. It depends on the delivery and what they're actually saying. It's always nice to hear compliments, right?
So first of all, probably none of the guys in here would whistle like that in an objectifying way at a woman who is a stranger. Is that correct?
It doesn't work.
Just think that.
Well, what is your name?
Rain.
Raymond. Most guys who are intelligent recognize it doesn't work. You know, the worst thing that a guy can do is have a big Playboy thing on his car, you know, which tells every woman that she's just one more object, and that so for the most part, the guys here wouldn't do that. But if they did do that, or if somebody did it, and a woman responded positively, most guys would be flustered, and because now they have to make a transition to dealing with her as a human being, and so part of them is feeling like, wow, she's really paying attention to me, and another part of them is feeling like, it's a good chance here I'll screw this up. And then another part of them is feeling like, if I don't screw it up right now, as soon as she finds out who I am or a little bit more about me, I will screw it up. And another part is feeling like she's only playing a game with me, like I was doing with her to prove a point. And so all sorts of confusing feelings are happening for him simultaneously. And so a little bit like what happened in that movie on the Wall Street thing. The guys didn't respond because they really knew the woman was putting him on, and he was just getting reverse treatment. Good question though. Do girls or women objectify guys who reject them?
Yeah.
What do girls or women say? The guy, what's the word jerk? Is it usually applied to a male or a female? You think of the word jerk, 99.9% of the time you think male. They're almost redundant. And so imagine, you're out with a guy and what did you say, John?
Oh, I didn't think.
She said I would say dick.
Oh, you would say dick, yes.
And I said, don't say dick, dicks are a good thing.
But I would call him what was a sexist pig. I wouldn't call him a jerk. Right?
Yes, well, you'd call him some,
Neanderthal,
Yeah.
like it's like very dated, very out of touch
Right.
with what they're doing.
yes, so we might, so if the guy you really are attracted to, so let's take two scenarios. Scenario one, you're out with a guy and and you're not very attracted to him and you're happy to end the date. And the following, you got out of it. Phew. The following morning, you're saying to your women friends, I sure hope he doesn't call back. He doesn't call back, and you have a sense of what? Relief. Exactly. What did you say?
Rejection.
Rejection? Give her a hug.
Some girls want to be wanted, and then as soon as the guy does, like, they'll be wanted by another guy, and they won't be interested in the guy, and then as soon as the guy stops wanting them, then they want the guy.
Another scenario, yes, exactly. We all saw this with sisters and brothers even, like you're playing a game where with two guys and kids playing tag. You run one way and then the other person who's being chased stops, and then suddenly the chase starts in a different direction. So there's an element to that. But let's go back to the jerk issue and what the girls and women do around objectifying when they feel rejected. So we almost always hear, so if the following morning the guy that you weren't interested doesn't call back, you sort of have a sense of relief. But if you really were strongly interested in him and he doesn't call back, and then he doesn't call back the next day after that, and the next day after that, he is a what?
Jerk.
He's a jerk.
But why can't the girl call him?
well, that's, yes.
She's not
She should.
But I'm like,
Yes, but in the solution part of all this, we're going to be talking about exactly that issue. But right now I'm sort of focusing on how she uses the objectification also to be able to handle rejection, because it hurts less to be rejected by a jerk than it does to be rejected by her and her girlfriends concluding that he really was out of her league, and he probably was looking for a woman who was more cultured, more humorous, more warm, more attractive, more this or that. What are the qualities that led him to not calling me back is not a discussion that happens. What often, I mean, sometimes it does, but I mean, it happens among more sophisticated women, more educated women, who usually don't get rejected as often because they're more introspective. But the word jerk, when it's used, is very frequently used as a way of being able to handle the rejection, because it hurts less to be rejected by a jerk than it does to be rejected by a tapestry careful, thoughtful, educated, sensitive guy, the type that you always wanted. And so both sexes have their way of objectifying what rejects them, handling rejection. They just do it in different types of ways. So the next question is, yes, say your name too.
My name's Lila.
And by the way, that was Liz, my wife. Sorry, I didn't ask. And Amy, yes, thank you very much. That's Liz and Amy and Lila.
And then what about, there's also objectification of men by women before the rejection happens. Is that also a, or even just like sexual, just like how men, will, objectify women by her tits in their ass or whatever. I think women do that too with guys. Is that also, do you think, a defense for future possible rejection? If you're looking at a guy just in terms of his status or his stature or whatever it is, and is that just natural?
Yes, that is the male. So men objectify women to a much greater degree as sex objects. Women objectify men to a much greater degree as what type of objects?
Status.
Success objects. So it's sex objects versus success objects. So the Playboy is the sex object. The People magazine is almost filled with, I think it was 2.4 billion people watching the marriage of Princess Diana to Prince Charles, and the average man watching that, which was a very small percentage of men, but the average male watching that felt he came up short of Castle. And so so just like the female sensing the male having all these extremely strong standards, especially magnified by pornography, about what a female that he's attracted to should be, the male watching the female read about all these successful men, he feels he comes up short in the same type of way that the woman feels she comes up short.
I think women objectify men as sex objects too. It
Yes.
depends on the woman,
Mhm.
and maybe even the status of the woman might have something to do with it too.
Absolutely. The higher the status of the woman,
The more they'll objectify.
economically, the more she's likely to be interested in the man, allow herself to express that part of herself.
Right, yeah.
that's
yeah.
right.
Or, I'm
Yes,
curious
say
about-
your name again.
My name is Seth Osterman. I'm curious about the use of the word objectification,
Mhm.
and how calling a man a jerk is objectifying them. Seems like it's a distancing mechanism,
Oh, what?
maybe distancing, or something like that, rather than necessarily an objectification of them. I think of objectification, around, I agree with, I'm not sure your name, but
Right.
women, look at men as sexual beings as much. If you want to call that objectification, make it a pejorative, then that's fine, but, they're creating distance between themselves and the person by calling them a jerk. How is that objectification?
It's, anybody want to take that for a second?
It's dehumanizing them, and it's reducing them from like a,
But dehumanizing, how is that objectification?
well, then there's a
If you look at
spectrum
a man
from
and-
inanimate to animate, right? And so you're
But-
bringing it closer to the
I take
inanimate.
it objectification in the sexual sense, okay, you're saying,
No, I'm not talking about objectification in the sexual sense.
I get that,
Okay.
name calling, and it's calling a guy
but
a tool.
it seems like a confusion of terms to me.
Well, maybe a jerk, which is, definition of a jerk is in the dictionary, but like a tool, or I know a lot of young women.
Girls used to say that you guys are
Right, or a lot of women I know use the word
Not-
douchebag,
not-
like that's like there are a lot of women in the
undesirable to be
Yeah, the guy's a real
Is that
douchebag.
objectification?
Say your name.
Amy.
Amy?
Hi.
So, Amy, would you say what you just said?
Similar words would be like a tool, or a lot of young women that I know personally, and then in my practice use the word douchebag seems to be one of the new popular terms. That guy's a real douche or douchebag, which then that would be an object, but that would be objectifying, comparing him to some type of what they perceive to be an undesirable object.
I think that's the word, undesirable.
It's sort of whenever, like, if we call a man who is gay, we always refer to him as gay. That oftentimes reduces him to just his gayness, as opposed to the full human being that he is. But when it's said, the word jerk and the word dick and the word douchebag, for me, and we could disagree on this, are all a type of objectification. It's the reduction of somebody to something negative and pejorative. The word dick is, in a sense, the most offensive word. When I was very young, there were two equivalent offensive words, cunt and dick. But the word cunt has pretty much disappeared from the, at least from the
It was reclaimed,
was that,
reclaimed.
it said it's in the sexual, I'm sorry.
The derogatory.
What's
The kind, so like, if a guy honks or insult another guy, especially, he'll honk.
Oh, sometimes it calls a pussy, yes, the word
But
cunt
the
is not as
cunt,
frequently
I
used.
feel like you-
Cunt
Yes.
is like
I like
sacrilege.
Yes. And so when I was younger, cunt and dick were sort of the equivalent things. And then cunt began to be seen as being a really negative and pejorative thing. And so, unless you use it in a sort of sexual positive way, but the word dick has risen up as something we call both men and women who are really being assholes or jerks. And so the word dick, a male word, has applied like the word human being has been, but in the negative sense, to all people who are behaving in a really stupid way or obnoxious way. Amy, and then I'll move on to.
Oh, to Amy's, or right.
Yes.
I was gonna say, you said how the culture supports that minimizing. I recently was dating someone, there were things that I didn't really like about them, but overall the person was like a good human being. And I told a girlfriend and she said, well, he's just a trash bag. I said, no, he's not a trash bag, he's a nice guy, I just don't think that our values really match up and I just don't see it lasting long term. Oh no, he's just a trash bag, throw him to the curb, done with him. And I see this happen a lot with conversations with women when one woman's explaining maybe some concerns she might have about someone or some hesitation, some red flags, and it's met by the girlfriend with the intention to be supportive of objectifying or minimizing the guy, to be there for their friend. Oh, he's just a jerk. Oh, he's a douche, or he's a trash bag.
Yes.
And the culture of the way women support each other supports the minimizing of men.
So, just hear the last sentence that Amy said, which supported her entire, really accurate, in my opinion, explanation. The culture of supporting each other, female to female, is often done on the backs of minimizing the male. And it would be the same as, and it happens in the other direction also, but for the most part, if I'm in a group with a bunch of men and the guy is saying to me, sort of like, oh, I feel she's rejected me, the usual male response will be some version of how to fix it, how to do it differently, what you should do to either call her back, send her flowers, do this. So men will tend to move into fix-it mode with her as a way of supporting. So the male tends to frequently support by fixing, and the female tends to support in this type of way. Both are meant as support, but they have different types of outcomes, and one of the ways that women undermine other women is by not supporting them to try again, to try differently, to reinterpret, and so very frequently the woman ends up marrying a man